welcome. And I don't know about some of you, but I just watched a huge hailstorm come over our building. So I hope everyone is safe and inside this afternoon, although I know we're all tired of being inside. Welcome to an extra meeting that we're going to be holding, and we really appreciate everyone's flexibility, and particularly Representative Horn's availability to be with us this afternoon, especially on such a very, very busy day in Washington. I'm going to just go through a quick laundry list of things with you from the center's point of view so we can spend the rest of the hour or however long Congresswoman Horn is able to be on with us. But first of all, reminder, we have two other calls on Wednesday, one at 8 o'clock, which will be hosted by the Department of Commerce. I know there were a couple technical difficulties getting on that last week. We will send out the Zoom invitation again and assume that they had those glitches worked out. The other one will be at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, hosted by us, and it will be Governor's Secretary and Director of DHS, Justin Brown, to talk about what they are doing in that arena, as well as some innovation around their Be a Neighbor platform that might be helpful to us during this time. Another thing is I know you all hate them, but we would really encourage you in the next week or so when you receive a survey from us to take a few minutes to fill it out. I know the arts folks have had a survey going around, but we would like to do a sector-wide survey so that we can inform both the National Council people, our legislators, and our funders about everything that's going on in your organization right now. So we would appreciate you taking the time to fill that out when it comes out. We'll continue to send you our updates from Washington through the National Council for Nonprofits, and we hope you find those really helpful. You'll see those in our emails as well as on our website, where if you haven't been there lately, it is just chock full of incredible information, and we hope great resources for you. If there's anything that's missing from that, please call us and let us know if you want something else added. There's lots of fast-moving information, even information that was given out last week that is no longer applicable or has changed. We are staying abreast of all of it to the best of our ability. Please call us when you have questions. I know Congresswoman will address the SBA loans and the 7A loans, but there's a lot of details in those, and we're going to do our very best to be the provider of information for you on all of those. So with that, I do want to tell you a little bit about the format. Those of you who are on with Senator Langford and some of our other guests understand that with this many people, and I don't even know how many people are on the call, we really can't open it up for live chat, vocal chat. So please use the chat feature. I'm assuming that everybody by now is not only accustomed to Zoom, but experts on Zoom. But please use the chat feature, put your questions into the chat, and my staff, Dan's kind of the hero in this for us, as well as my program staff today, will be looking at all those questions. We know some of you sent them in advance, but after Congresswoman Horn addresses us, Dan will be the person asking her the questions that you've sent in. And I know it's going to be frustrating because I've been on the other end of this, that we can't answer everyone's questions. But please know, as always, we're recording all of these. They'll be available on our website, as well as we will forward these questions on to Congresswoman, so that if she wants to reach out in a different way at a later date, or her staff was to answer some of the things that didn't get answered, we'll make sure that that happens to the best of our ability. Dan, did I miss anything? Are we good? Oh, Dan, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay,
yes.
All right. With that, Congresswoman Horn, I believe, I can't see you, but I know you're out there. Thank you so much. We've seen a little bit of you on the news. I think most of you know that she has been quarantined because of some of the exposure that's happened at the U.S. Capitol. So we really appreciate you taking the time. I know that hasn't slowed down your schedule at all, and I know that there was an important vote. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our representative from the 5th Congressional District, Representative Horn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Jamie. I think I've unmuted. I wasn't sure what the best way to do that was. I think we're all getting used to these Zoom conferences, which I find actually very helpful, and also, you know, sometimes frustrating. But I think it's a great way to be able to see your faces. There are so many So many faces here, people that I know and people that are doing just amazing work. So thank you to the Center for Nonprofits. Marnie, thank you. Jan, thank you. And to the whole staff at the Center for Nonprofits for all you do to support Oklahoma's nonprofit community, but also to provide so many valuable information and resources that we can continue to get out. I know that especially right now, there's so much uncertainty. There's so many questions, and the needs are only going to continue to grow. They're not going to get less, they're going to get more. But the challenges that each of you and your organizations are facing are probably going to also expand, especially in light of the health and the economic impact of this crisis. And we could go on and on. So what I thought I would do, and hopefully this is helpful to you, is just give you a little bit of a context and an update of what we know now and where things are, and then answer some questions. And I think, Marnie, you hit one of the very important points, is things are moving fast. Information is moving fast, things are changing. This is the third big package that we've passed in about as many weeks. And so some of the questions that we have, that I know that you have, we're going to have answers to more specifically than others. And others, if we don't have the specific answers, my answer is going to be, we don't know yet, but we're going to stay in touch and keep you posted, and we'll be happy to work with you. And before I get into any of that update, I think it's really important, just as the Center for Nonprofits is there to help all of you, we are also here to help. Businesses, constituents, my office and my team is here to help. We are actively working very closely on the small business issues with the Small Business Administration, with all of the relevant agencies and individuals that can help you or other businesses to figure out, 1, what you qualify for, 2, how to apply, 3, what's the best way to get there and what makes sense for you. We're working on a more information and a guide. We're going to be doing some webinars and trainings, but you can reach out to our office directly with your specific circumstances, and my team will be there to help. So I want to give you that information just off the bat. I know several of my staff are on this call, and they're here and happy to help. And you can reach out to my office. The website is horn.house.gov, or you can also send, I always forget the phone number, so bear with me while I always get the phone number, or you can call at 405, let me see, sorry, 602, there we go, 602-3074. And that's my office here in Oklahoma City. So we are all working remotely, as I assume many of you are, to the maximum extent possible. But we're answering the phones, emails, we're working very hard. And I'm happy to report that this is my last day in quarantine. I will still be doing everything I can to make sure that I'm properly participating in social distancing, and we're doing everything to help flatten the curve from a personal level, but I'm very much looking forward to getting out of the house. So that means I wasn't in DC today when the House debated and voted on the CARES Act, but was actively involved over the past couple weeks in shaping that legislation, ensuring that it came out in a bipartisan way, advocating for funding for small businesses and nonprofits, and making sure that especially nonprofits weren't left out of this. Because the work that has to be done is so important, and you all are filling so many important roles, and we need to make sure that even if your donations dip, if things change, that you can have the resources that you need. So I'll go over just the 3 packages, general broad strokes, what was in today's, and then we can get into specific questions. The first package, of course, a couple weeks ago was an $8.3 billion funding package targeted at a health response, at getting funding for research, for vaccine development, PPEs, testing, and so many things that are needed surrounding our public health response to the COVID-19 crisis. The second one we passed out of the House 2 weeks ago, well, tonight/tomorrow morning, which was the Families First Coronavirus Response Package. In that, we included a number of things that I think are very important, including shoring up food assistance programs, and some additional protections for unemployment, and a number of other things that are helping and will continue to help, including free testing for individuals who need it, and a number of other things in that package. This package is just sort of the follow-on step, because one of the things that's been missing, in my view, is support in the form of money. Let's just be blunt about it, money, because you're all working for nonprofits. We know that you have to ask for money, right? It's just the way that it goes. For small businesses and nonprofits to cover the costs of doing business, of keeping the lights on, even for those of you who've had to shift to or other businesses have had to close the doors, but to encourage businesses and nonprofits to use those funds to take care of regular expenses and to keep as much as possible as many of the workforce on staff. So that we're not pushing everything over to unemployment and then having a harder time getting people back into the workforce on the other side, which will impact you in a number of ways. And so there's more in this package, although I don't think that's going to be the end of the story. Today's bill that passed included $377 billion for nonprofits and small businesses. Nonprofits are included in that. The bulk of it, $350 billion, in the form of funds that you can apply for that will essentially be forgiven. So they're basically grants if they are used for regular expenses that have been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, and to retain workforce. There are a few other provisions in there. I won't go too far down there because I'm sure you'll have questions about specific ones. It also included an expansion of unemployment benefits. You may get questions about these. It's very important. Not only was it an expansion in length of time up to 4 months now, but it also an increase in the amount up to $600 per week on top of whatever the states provide. And this bill specifically includes gig workers and the self-employed, which generally unemployment doesn't cover. And those are segments that we know are of people. I've had a lot of calls and people asking of what that means. It also in the broad strokes, it's going to include direct financial assistance payments to 125 million Americans. This does cover individuals who are on Social Security, be it disability or retirement. A majority of veterans, we can talk about specifics on that if you have questions, that will come directly to folks who need it. And it phases out at an income level. Individuals that make more than between $75,000 and $99,000 a year, it starts to phase out between those places. And once you hit over $99,000 a year per individual, you won't receive those assistance. So for most of you in the communities you're serving, that's not necessarily that over $100,000 a year is not necessarily going to apply. The few other things a couple other things I really want to touch on because I think it's important. One of the biggest challenges we've had is access to personal protective equipment, testing, access to healthcare, including telemedicine, including mental health, and so many things along those lines. Because we know that there's an incredible amount of uncertainty, of fear, of just, I think many people are almost shell-shocked about what we're facing. So we know that when we're isolated, which we need to be creating this distance because we have to flatten the curve, it creates whole other sets of issues that some of you I see in my window in front of me. I know specifically you're dealing with a lot of those, and so your needs are only going to increase. And so we fought really hard to get an extension of the CCBHC, the Certified Community Behavioral Health Center funding for mental health, specifically to make sure that our community health centers and others could provide telemedicine, increased reimbursements for Medicare and Medicaid, so we can continue to get services out to the communities without putting people at risk as much. And there's also $150 billion in this package for healthcare, for PPEs, for a number of different things that are really critical, and $150 billion for state and local governments. Several weeks ago, before this really even, we hit this crisis point, started to fight for a moratorium, at least momentarily, on shutting off water, because Oklahoma City has one of the highest water shutoff rates in the country. And very glad that I was able to work with the mayor and the utilities department they've stopped shutting off water, because we know without access to clean water, it's really hard for people to wash their hands, to follow the CDC guidelines and do all of those things that are really required to help us reduce the spread. And OG&E also followed suit. So, Oklahomans know how to rally around, but we also know that with these massive changes that we've got to make adjustments, and this is the time for the federal government to come in. And the last thing I'll say in terms of some of the other things, food programs and supports, we've begun to address a number of things that would limit the ability for our students who rely on school breakfast and lunch programs to get access to the food that they need, as well as programs that support our seniors and other vulnerable members of the community. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I'm losing track of days. I don't know, does anybody else feel that way? I mean, is it Monday? Is it Friday? Is it 5 a.m. or is it 8 p.m.? I don't really know, because I'm on the phone or on a teleconference. But that's great, because we can keep going. The Department of Education announced it was going to remove some of the restrictions for family members or others picking up food for children. So there's just so much more. And to that end, some of these questions I'm going to have better answers for than others. Because we just got the bill text, it just passed out of the House. Some of it's going to require implementation by the agencies, and so I won't be able to specifically say go here, here, here. But as I mentioned, I got several of my staff that are on this call, and we're working very diligently to get the best information out as quickly as possible. And I want to hear from you about what your concerns are, and we will have more. We'll have more packages after this. This is the third, but it is not the last. And we've just got to keep going. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure that we're doing everything possible to get the resources, the relief, the support to our communities in the best way possible, to make sure that we're not letting groups of individuals or people fall through the cracks, so that we can come out on the other side of this stronger, but realizing we're all in this together in the meantime. So I'm going to stop there so we can get to as many questions as possible. And thank you again for everybody that is joining us today. It's wonderful to see many of you. So thank you. I can't hear you.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Horn. And I do want to say, the Center for Nonprofits over the past couple of weeks has worked very closely with some of Horn staffers as well as Langford. And I just want to say our delegation is really putting our sector first as we've gone through 2 separate stimulus packages now. So we are very appreciative of all the work that you're putting into this. So I want to get to a few general questions and then maybe go into some specifics. Probably the biggest thing that is front of mind for nonprofits right now are going to be these small business administrative loans. And we know that there are even some better opportunities for nonprofits with this latest package to the CARES Act that would forgive those loans to be used for payroll, et cetera. I mean, obviously we want to keep as many people hired, and because of our sector especially, we have very specialized individuals and we don't want to lose them. So can you talk just generally about SBA and what you are envisioning and how nonprofits can take advantage of these programs?
Absolutely. Dan, thank you very much. That's such an important question. So The SBA loans that were the very first available before we passed this act, before we've been able to get more, I'm going to call them grants, because essentially they're grants, because if you get the money and you use it to keep people on payroll and to keep the lights on, essentially some very, routine expenses that have been impacted by this virus and by the crisis that it's caused, then those are forgivable. So they're essentially grants unless you go out and use it for something else totally unrelated, which is part of the argument that we had on the getting this package to fruition, is making sure that there was sufficient oversight and insight. So the first set of sort of SBA loans that I think everybody was talking about that had to go through were the disaster relief loans. It was an existing program through SBA, and there were a few hurdles we had to overcome. Oklahoma has now qualified. But those loans, the disaster relief SBA loans, I think right now it's about 3.75% interest. So if you need that, those are still available. But I would advise that if you can hang on just a little bit, this program should be stood up very soon, and it will provide relief at no cost to the nonprofit or the small business, provided it's used to retain employees, to keep on payroll, to do those things, and then you'll have other resources. So basically, the program that is in this package, the set $350 billion is going to go through the SBA. And I'm going to look at a few of my facts over here too, just to make sure that I've got all of the specifics. So the SBA is going to be taking that on, and we are going to be putting together some packages and some webinars of how to move through it. But I would recommend that if you can take advantage of the program, the Payment Protection Program loans, it's a mouthful, Payment Protection Program loans that we pass through the CARES Act, that would be the ideal way to go. And then if you need additional resources, then we could work with you to identify what is next, because those are the ones that are intended to help you and small businesses keep people on payroll, because from an economic and community perspective, that is so important. But we also understand that it's not your fault. You didn't, go out there and say, hey, we want a virus that's going to impact everything we're trying to do. None of us did. So there are, in this category, I want you to be, in case somebody says anything that's wrong, 501c3s are included in this category, and as well as small businesses with 500 employees or fewer. And so that will go through the SBA. Size is determined. I could go on how size is determined, but if the costs aren't eligible, there are other programs that you can use. If you've got some other costs that you need to cover, that we could help connect you with. But I would suggest that for most of the nonprofits and representatives on this call, you're going to want to try to use the PPP loans, which are the Payment Protection Loan programs, and then we could go on to some of the others. There's also in this bill a small business debt relief program. We can talk about that if you want. That's for businesses that already have SBA loans, that it basically will help to provide debt relief for businesses that are trying to pay those back. And then still the economic injury and disaster loans and grants are still out there. And there's a number of other things, including, I think there will be, and Charlie, I see you there. So if I say this right, will you nod your head so I can make sure I'm correct? Charlie's my staffer that's in DC, but is expert on the small business on the policy side. Charlie, there's also a chunk of the funding in the CARES Act that nonprofits and small businesses would be able to get $10,000 like shorter term emergency grants, right, to cover that window that is needed. I don't know if Charlie's also says he's Kendra Horn, but he's not, and he's up in this I don't know if anybody can see him. Charlie, can you wave so maybe whoever?
Yeah, actually, I was just
there you
unmuted.
go. Okay, great.
So
Can you
yes,
help-
those that $10,000 grant that you're talking about, that is actually part of the economic disaster relief loan. So there's the loan, and then there's also a grant that comes along with it too that you would apply for separately. You would apply for both. In fact, I think it's we're still learning this because it was just in the bill. But when you apply for the economic disaster injury loan, the grant is part of that application as well. So you apply for the grant when you apply for the loan, and that's up to $10,000, as you said, Congresswoman.
Thank you very much. And there'll be more. So what I would say is, if you're not sure, you can reach out to us. I know the Center for Nonprofits is going to have more guidance as well. You'll keep working together. But we are, as quickly as we can, getting step-by-steps together for everybody to help you get through this. And part of it depends on the agency guidance and implementation. And the goal with all of this was to provide flexibility, because we know that there's a variety of needs for small businesses, and some have relationships with bankers, some don't, and there's a whole variety. But those PPP loans are, I think, probably one of the things that many of you are going to really want to count on and are going to make a big difference for you.
Thank you. Obviously, as everybody on this call is going to realize, the SBA various programs are robust, but that also can make them a bit complicated. The Center for Nonprofits will be, in the next week or two, giving out as much information as we can about these loans, and we will be here to help. We're at a point where we're educating ourselves on this. I think the one thing that Oklahoma has going for it is our own Secretary of Commerce is a banker himself, and will have the best information possible for us to get it out to you as soon as we get it. So I appreciate your comments about the SBA loans, and thank you, Charlie. It's good to see you again. A couple of other questions that are coming up around the CARES Act. And this gets into some details. There's been some contradiction around 501c3s. Are any other 501c types included in this, such as C6s, which are associations, et cetera?
Dan, that's a very good question, and we've been digging in. I'm gonna direct that one to Charlie for a moment, because we've been combing through the language of the legislation. I know that there was a conversation around that. And Charlie, do you know if C6s, C4s are included? Oh, you're muted, Charlie. Unmute yourself if you can. There you go.
Okay. So my understanding is it depends on the type of loan. For example, those PPP loans that you were discussing that allow for forgiveness of the loan, which basically kind of makes them a grant. 501c3s and others are qualified for that. Now, there are other restrictions with some of the other loans where the nonprofit has to have a fundraising arm, or I'm sorry, not a fundraising arm, but a for-profit arm. So my understanding in talking to some folks at the SBA the example they use is Goodwill, where Goodwill is a nonprofit, but they have stores where they do sell something and get revenue from it. A symphony orchestra would be something similar, where they sell tickets. And so nonprofits like that do also qualify for other SBA loans, but those PPP loans should be open to 501c3s and 501c6s and others. My understanding is those are the most broad as provided by the CARE Act, because again, the PPP loans especially are geared towards helping nonprofits and businesses keep their employees and use that money for payroll.
Hey, Charlie, this is Marnie Taylor. Real quick on that subject. We understand on the SBA loans, the disaster loans, I'll call them. So we have the SBA disaster loans and the PPPs. on the disaster loans where you talked about having a for-profit arm, and that's how I've seen it in quotes, having something for profit, which means like at the center, we earn money from memberships or trainings. So there is in our world something called UBIT, and UBIT is when you have a for-profit part of your nonprofit that is not mission related that you actually have to pay tax on. And not that many nonprofits have that, but I think some people have interpreted the for-profit piece of the SBA loans to mean that you have to have UBIT income rather than just the kinds of income that you just said, which are mission related, and therefore we don't pay UBIT on.
They're not. Marty,
So-
that's a good, sorry, go ahead, Charlie. That's a really good question. And if we can't answer that, we will get the answer for that. That may come through guidance. Charlie.
My sense in talking to the SBA is that it is not as narrow as requiring UBIT, that it is broader than that. But we can dig into that question and get specifics. But I think the for-profit piece can be part of the mission and not required, is not specific to UBIT.
Right. What I did hear from, and it was from a local person with the Small Business Administration, and don't quote me, it was just in an email, and we all are being careful because there's so much information, but it did say if you are totally donated income, which some of our nonprofits are totally grant or have no earned income at all, you would not qualify for the SBA loan. That's what I saw in writing from the SBA here.
That is my understanding for some SBA loans, but I think especially for the PPP loans, my understanding is that is not the case.
That's correct. And I should probably use the disaster loan, which was the one that came out first versus the PPP. So that's what I think for the disaster loans, before you fill it out, make sure you would even qualify, because right now our understanding is if you're totally donated income and not earned, you may not qualify.
I should say one other piece is, as I spoke with the Oklahoma SBA, one of their work yesterday, who works for the administration, he shared that, listen, if you're unsure, still apply. He said, don't disqualify yourself unless you really think that you do not qualify. Always better to apply and see. Now, that also means that there's uncertainty during the process. But when I posed him that question, he said, if folks are unsure and they're just not sure, go ahead and apply, and it's better than disqualifying yourself based off maybe shaky information you're not sure about.
Great idea.
And to add to that, I know there's a lot of questions about how, what's the step-by-step, when, a lot of things that, and some of these places where there's a lack of clarity that I think you just pointed out, Marty, that what does for-profit mean? When legislation is messy at best when there's time to draft it, and I think that there's going to be more clarification and that is needed, and with the urgency of this, it's going to be ongoing. In terms of getting the SBA standing pieces of this up. Parts already exist, but parts don't. So as quickly as we can, and as quickly as we get the clarification from SBA or other related agencies, we'll get it out to everyone. But I wish we could say clearly on everything right now, but the truth of the matter is, the legislative language has just been out a couple of days. We've been going through, is it 900 pages? Is that right, Charlie? And we've been going through it and trying to dig in. Some of it's going to require interpretation and feedback from us. So we are going to do our best to get you the answers and information as quickly as possible. But also, if we don't know or it's unclear, we are going to tell you that, because some of it is just not something that we have clarity on right now. And I don't want to tell anybody this is absolutely the way it is when it may be in flux, but we'll do our best to keep you up to date as much as possible and help move through this process and determine which loans, which programs might be the best in concert with the SBA. So.
Great. Thank you. We trust you implicitly. So.
Yeah. And I think this is just for everybody on this call. I mean, probably the most important thing we're going to be doing very quickly is getting with our local SBA folks to get us as much detailed information as we have. As you know, and can see, the Congresswoman, also Senator Lankford and Secretary Copeland have gotten a ton of information just in the past few days about these programs. So as we get more clarity, we'll share it with everyone. Representative Horn, there have been several questions about ability of faith-based organizations to have access. If they're 501c3s, that should be no issues either on faith-based organizations?
I believe so. Charlie, is
that's my understanding
that's
as
my
well, especially again in regards to the PPP loans.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, specifically with PPP, and I can't speak with regard to all of them. So we'll try to be as specific as possible, but the PPP loans, that's my understanding. So it sounds like we're on the same page there.
And there have been a few questions. I think we can answer this, but if you are wanting to get loans from the previous disaster loans from SBA versus these PPP loans, if you do it before March 30th, March 31st, you can apply to both, but after that, you can only apply to one versus the other. Charlie, was that your interpretation?
I have not. I do not have an answer for you on that. My understanding is that I have not heard that March 30 deadline. My understanding is that you can apply for all loans for the foreseeable future that you would like to. I know I've spoken to folks that have applied for multiple, and you can apply for one and still apply for another. And I believe also you can use some to repay others. So I think there's a lot of crossover. I have not heard on that deadline, Dan, but I can follow up to get clarification there.
Yeah, we had some notification from our Department of Commerce last night clarifying this. So we'll make sure and get that. They have said to us that there is going to be, after April 1st, you can only use one of the programs and not multiple. So I just didn't know if you'd heard anything at the federal level.
I haven't seen that, Dan, but I don't know if that's a state-based thing, or we'll have to look at that. That's a new piece of information for me too.
The other thing is with these new loans, the loan to grant program, going through local banks, so we will be able to use some of those community banks. Anything you want to add about that?
I'll let Charlie speak specifically to it in a moment, but we worked hard to make sure that that our small businesses had the ability to work with our community banks. When we were working on how this legislation came together, because we know that our local small community mid-sized banks, the ones that many of us work with, like, they know you and they know the businesses. And we were concerned from a policy perspective that if everything had to go through the SBA, something that on paper that somebody else might not understand, or a different agency, the banker, the local banker that has that relationship with you would understand it. And so that was an important piece of this puzzle. Charlie, go ahead and add anything else.
Yeah, one loan I know that in talking to bankers that has been really useful is the Sba Express Loan. These are loans that the bank handles. It's on the bank's books. You work with your local banker. And the nice thing about the loan is it is guaranteed up to a certain percentage by the SBA. Through the CARES Act, the Sba Express Loan program was given a lot more money, and the guarantee was raised. So I would, if you're hoping to work for your community banker, I would certainly ask about the Sba Express Loan. The other thing is the reason for the Express part is these are loans that are expedited a little bit faster, my understanding is, than other SBA loans. Now, given the current situation and the high volume of applications, I don't know exactly what the timetable is for that, and it may have been pushed back than what it regularly is. But my understanding is, on average, the SBA Express loans move faster as far as being accepted and granted and given than other SBA loans. But in talking to bankers, the SBA Express loans are the ones that they really like because it's right on the bank's books. They handle the loan. They work with you directly.
Hey, Dan, I'm looking at, and you may be ready to ask this question too, but someone said, and a lot of this is kind of rumor out there, says there's some language that people who apply for the PPP loans had to prove they were unable to receive credit in other ways. And I didn't understand that. We understood it was open to anyone, whether they could have done a conventional loan or not. Obviously, they're going to turn into grants. So.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't think that's right based on what we put in to the bill, but I'll go back and check it. I think one of the challenges that we have right now is, in addition to all of the confusion and the things that we're facing, is there's so much information swirling around, but that was not the intent, is that you couldn't, especially for the PPP, it wasn't, I can't get credit somewhere else. It's, you know, this crisis is impacting our business. We need to keep going. So that doesn't sound right to me. We'll confirm that. Charlie, you're welcome to add, but I don't think so.
Thanks, thank you. We had never heard that before, and Charlie, you will get this chat, all these questions that that'll be available. So
I'm writing them down too, but thank you. That's good to know.
Yeah, and there's several questions about only applying for one. We will have to verify what the actual implementation is. There was an intention, we had the intention to be able to layer some of these, knowing that the needs would be different. So we will circle back on that, because I know it's an important question for many of you.
So Representative Horn, I'm going to move to a slightly different topic around this. Part of this stimulus package is going to be direct cash to Americans. And on our last call with Senator Langford, but also I think, just to let you know, there is some concern with nonprofits who work with clientele who have disabilities and who are using Social Security disability income.
Okay.
Our rules around individuals who are on disability, they don't have more than, I believe it's $2,000 in assets at any time. And there have just been some questions about an unintended consequence of a direct injection of cash, those individuals or families, that there could be some issues around their qualifications for disability.
So Dan, I think that because this is a one-time payment that is coming through this relief package as a means to help our communities, and because Social Security recipients, whether it's disability, SSDI, or retirement, are specifically included in these one-time payments, I don't think that should be a disqualifier. Now, if someone is going through the process of applying for SSDI and they're working on it, I think we're probably going to have to figure out a way to determine that any assets they have are not that anything that comes in this $1,200, or if it's a couple $2,400, is not disqualifying. But we'll make sure we check on that. But it is my understanding that these are one-time payments. They're from the government. They're not taxable. It's just here's some money to help. So it shouldn't be a disqualifier for those individuals who are working to get disability insurance, or Social Security disability and disability payments. So it shouldn't be, because it's outside the stream of any other assets or taxable income. So that's something that shouldn't disqualify, but an important question for us to make sure that we get clarification on. But it should not be a disqualifying asset for the individuals who are working to get disability.
Very good. Well, we've got a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you want to relay to nonprofits, or anything you're seeing upcoming in the next few weeks, congressionally, et cetera?
Yes. So a couple things. This is not the last package. We will see a couple more. I think it's going to be a few weeks before the next packages are built. And they're going to look a little bit different. We've been attempting to work on different things and fill holes that we identified. So what I would share is, I think we're going to see some more infrastructure projects and funding to help keep things moving. We're actively working on some more resources to help with like utility disconnects and things like that. There's some in this bill, but the thing I would really share is we need to know what's working and what's not, and your experience going through it. Also, we are still figuring out how some of these programs are going to work. And so we don't have all of the answers yet of this is your step-by-step, but what we are doing is in each of the different areas, we're working to get the information as quickly and as clearly as possible so we can get it out to you and out to the communities so we can make sure it's most useful. And the more feedback we have, comments, concerns, questions, we've got several here that we'll take back to get clarification on to help all of you. That is one of the things that we need. And there's a couple of other areas that just I'm going to touch on really quickly. One is broadband and technology access, especially with our schools going to distance learning or no buildings. We're working with the school districts. We're working as much as we can. Broadband access and more resources towards getting internet connections for communities, children, others that are not currently connected is in the same category, in my view, as many of the other essential services, because we want to keep these kids learning. So those are the kind of things I think we're going to see in the next few packages. But certainly, this is moving so fast, and there's so much happening. I would just ask that you continue to keep us informed and posted. Thank you for those of you who have shared your experiences, concerns, thoughts with me personally or with my team. We want and need to hear from you, and we're going to keep working to make sure that we get these practical solutions included into the next few bills, and make sure that our nonprofit communities are not left out of this, because you're providing such a critical service. We've got to make sure that we're doing everything to keep, as much as we can, keep this balance, because it's gonna take a little bit longer before we get out of it, and that's the challenging thing. We can't. I wish I could provide a better roadmap, but much of what I might tell you, if I put something together in an ideal situation, might be thrown out the window as of tomorrow. But what I can guarantee is what we will continue to fight for and do our best to keep the information flowing.
Absolutely. And I do want to remind everybody on this call that if you live outside of Representative Horn's district, she is the 5th Congressional District, make sure to use the Find My Legislator function in Google so that you can reach out to your own representatives. I know that their staffers are wanting to hear from nonprofits, and especially because we are small businesses, we are a large business sector in Oklahoma. So do reach out as constituents if you live there or if your nonprofit is there, and let them know what's going on. So, well, we want to thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate all of you. The Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits is just, you all are wonderful. You do such amazing work. And as someone who has been and worked with nonprofits, thank you for all you're doing. And it's important that we include you and make sure that we're taking care of you, because as it's important, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. Nonprofit is tax status. It is not a business model. You still have to pay your bills, your employees, and take care of people. So we'll be here to work with you and help. And if we need to do another one, if we want to do another one of these, that we'll be happy to keep this conversation going.
Thank you so much. I do want to mention one thing. Am I muted? You know, and Representative Horn, you do know this. There's the largest donors to nonprofits are individuals.
Yes.
We think about the private foundations who are very generous, and the corporations and planned giving and everything, but really individuals who are alive and well are the lifeblood of the nonprofit sector after government grants and earned income. So I know that Senator Langford worked very hard to get the universal deduction in the bill. At it's at a smaller level than I'm sure you would like to have seen, and I know he would like to have seen. I don't know if there's ever going to be a chance to go back as these get revised and get that to a higher point. But I think what's happening, just, and you know this, but right now, more people are knocking at our doors. Our individual funders are getting really scared about their own individual situations, and we all can feel that ourselves. Most of us on this call probably work at nonprofits, but donate to nonprofits ourselves. You start pulling in on your own funds. And so, this incentive, our hits are going to last. The stores might reopen, the restaurants will reopen, their earned income will get back, and they'll have some recovery time. But I really see our recovery time as very, very long, because I think individuals it's going to take a long time for their stock portfolios or their cash to come in. It's going to take a really long time for foundations, because we're going to see a hit in about another year when their corpuses are smaller and their giving gets decreased for a couple of years out. There's a delay in that. For right now, the foundations are in good shape because they're working off of past numbers. So I know you know this, but when the doors reopen to other businesses, the nonprofit sector is going to be in a lull that lasts a lot longer. So to continue to think of us not just right now while these immediate things happen, but even over the next couple of years when we're having a hard time recovering from the loss of that donated income.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, Marnie, that is such an important point, that the bills that we passed so far, the relief is about the near term. And I like to think about it we've got the immediate needs, the midterm needs, and the longer term needs. And we're going to have to adjust to all of those as we go along. But you can count on us continuing to advocate for nonprofit sector and the important work you do. And we'll continue to have this dialogue. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office if you need help and support. Center for Nonprofits has our contact information. Charlie is in DC, and we've got, is Trent on? I don't know. We've got staff here. Although one of the very interesting things I think about this moving to more virtual is that we're all so even more connected than we were in some ways. So we're here for y'all, and thank you for everybody that's participated today and for your time, and really appreciate your interest, and we'll follow up on more questions as well.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. We know you're all being bombarded, and we really, really do appreciate it. It's very valuable. It's not that often. Sorry that it took a crisis to bring our nonprofit sector together with you and some of the other important people, but we'll take advantage of that and look at that as one of the lemonade out of the lemons we're having right now. So we appreciate it. Dan, any last words? Somebody asked, where are we going to get this? This will all be posted on our website. It takes a little while for the recording to download and all of it to download, but it'll be posted there, but we'll make sure we get it directly to Charlie and to Congresswoman Horn's office here as well. Dan, anything else?
Marnie, if I could add on the questions, if anyone in the excuse me, if anyone in the session wants to download the chat, they can, and there will be some links and things in there they can use. So they can do that promptly before we close the meeting. And in there is also the links to where these will all be, the recordings will be stored.
Right. And I did notice that Carlos Johnson, who is on our board, my chair-elect, as most of you know, is in extraordinary CPA and finance person did seem to put an answer about that March 30 date in there. So knowing Carlos, he was Googling and figuring it out. So you may look for some answers that other people had, including Carlos, to some of those questions.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good
Have
one.
a good weekend. Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks,
See
you
next
too.
week.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.